Howdy, folks, and welcome back to Healthy Humor. I'm your host, Doc MB. With all the talk in the media recently about anti-inflammatory diets and, the dangers of inflammation, and especially with the reissue of the National Geographic anti-inflammation issue, I thought this would be a great time to talk about inflammation and, some about what it is, what it isn't, how you can be stopping it, and how it truly affects your body. The word inflammation gets used oftentimes as, a buzzword. An anti-inflammatory, especially when you look at, an anti-inflammatory diet, right? It's very eye-catching. It's clickbait. It sounds bad, right? But inflammation is really actually, it's part of your body's healing process. A simple definition for inflammation would be the body's natural response to injury or infection. And like I said, it's part of the healing process. So the reason your body responds with inflammation is to flood the area with red blood cells and start hopefully healing whatever is going on, in that injured site. If you're anything like I was, then growing up, the first thing you learned about inflammation, or really about any injury, was that if it starts to become inflamed or swollen or anything like that, elevate it above your heart and ice it on and off for a while until the swelling goes down. So, from day one, I and probably a lot of you out there were taught inflammation is bad. We don't want it. We don't want that swelling. Let's stop it as soon as possible. Which is all fine and good when, we're talking about acute inflammation, which is your shorter term response to injury or illness. Again, that's your, I rolled my ankle, or I got hit with a fly ball at softball and now there's some swelling. Let's go put some ice on it so it doesn't, really swell up and maybe restrict motion or use, right? Like in the case of the fly ball, it might hurt your ability to keep playing in some way, or if you rolled your ankle on a walk, that might hurt your ability to keep walking that day. And especially if the inflammation stays, it could hurt your ability to walk for several days, certainly your comfort while walking. But that's our acute inflammation, right? That's the inflammation that, like I said, most of us learn about it when we're little kids and we learn how to handle it. Elevate the inflamed area above your heart and put it on ice, and don't leave the ice on for too long, right? That's what we're all taught when we're little, and that's not what the media is really talking about right now. It's certainly not what the National Geographic issue was talking about when they reissued it. What they're all talking about is chronic inflammation. And anytime you hear the word chronic, we're talking about a long-term condition. And in the case of chronic inflammation, again, it's our long-term, usually lower grade inflammation, and it contributes to a lot of negative health outcomes. It can lead to the development of diseases, but it can also just be pretty detrimental to our daily life and our ability to, go on with our daily life. When thinking about acute versus chronic inflammation, I like to think about my first car, actually, because, my first car was great. It was used. It was close to a decade old when I got it, which for a high school student was actually a pretty good car. But, the first couple times that one of the lights on the dash went off, like maybe to change my oil or something, that's like an acute inflammation, right? That signal goes off and it's there for a reason, and you deal with it and it goes away, right? Like you go get your oil changed, they turn off the light for you, right? Well, eventually the little indicator light to change my oil stopped working, and it gets hard to keep track of those dates in your head sometimes, and I wasn't always great at putting things in my calendar. So eventually, I wasn't really checking my oil all that much. And if you know anything about car engines, that's not very good for them, right? Don't need to talk about what happened to that car. But what I'm getting at here is, that the indicator light it's like acute inflammation. It's there for a reason. It has that purpose, and as soon as you take care of it, right? As soon as you change your oil, as soon as you put ice and elevate that inflamed area, the signal goes away, and the inflammation goes away. But when you're not dealing with, chronic inflammation, or you're letting that oil not get changed for far longer than it should just because you don't have the indicator light blinking in your face, and instead you're relying on other signs or signals that you may not be familiar with, maybe because you're a new car owner for the first time in your life, or maybe because, these signals are small and they're minute and they sneak up on us slowly over time. And if we aren't thinking about them, we aren't gonna go do anything about them. And that's our chronic inflammation. Unlike that first car that I had, our bodies are with us for the rest of our lives, right? They're not just with us until we get out of college and save up enough money to go get, a newer, nicer car, right? We don't get to, upgrade or, exchange our body for a new one at any point. We're kind of, this was a lifetime deal that we made at some point, right? So let's look at some of the causes of that chronic inflammation. Starting off with the biggest one that we talk about all the time, our diet, right? So things that are in our diet that can lead to that chronic inflammation: high levels of saturated fats, trans fats, or refined sugars, things like that. So staying away from foods that have too many fats in them or too many sugars in them. Think about a lot of our overly processed foods, a lot of the sweets. I know that those can be the hardest to kick sometimes, but the fats, and those specifically those saturated fats and those trans fats and the refined sugars, they're going to lead to our chronic inflammation. Our next biggest cause of chronic inflammation is lifestyle, which, if you listened to the minisode a couple weeks ago, then you'll remember that diet and lifestyle have the biggest influence on our health outcomes, specifically our life expectancy. And so it makes sense that, diet and lifestyle would influence chronic inflammation. When we look at lifestyle, though, in relation to chronic inflammation, we look a lot at our sedentary behavior, which makes sense. I mean, if you're leading a very sedentary lifestyle, things aren't moving, right? You're not getting that blood flow, and things are going to become inflamed. I know that if I sit too long, I can feel that my feet don't feel like they're getting enough circulation, and so I need to go on a walk, right? And people talk about that too with back pain or other things, right? So we need that good circulation to help keep inflammation low. And then chronic stress, which, I'm sure none of us are feeling any kind of chronic stress in our lives, right? I definitely can't say that I'm not always feeling some level of chronic stress, which there are some studies that say that the chronic stress is not as big of an influence if you are managing it correctly, which we'll get into some ways to reduce chronic inflammation later. But with chronic stress, sometimes it's hard to reduce that, but we really need to, not just because of obviously the chronic inflammation that it can cause, but for other detrimental side effects from that chronic stress. We also have poor sleep, and that can be, a lack of sleep or just poor quality of sleep, because even, poor quality is a lack of sleep, because you're not getting the rest, you're not hitting your REM cycles correctly, and it's not allowing your body to heal while you're sleeping the way it normally would. And it causes your body to do things like increase in, the low-grade chronic inflammation over time. Our third big cause of chronic inflammation is, or it will be, environmental factors. But, when we think about environmental factors, a lot of times we think about pollutants in the air, or toxic water, which we definitely mean in this case as well. But when we talk about this low-grade chronic inflammation, wow, we're talking about the pollutants and toxins that we bring into our home more than anything else. What is hanging on in our foods that we're consuming, or the products that we're putting on our skin and our hair, things like that. A lot more so than we are about the truly environmental, the ones that are just kind of out there in the air and the water. We're talking about more the things that we are actually bringing in and very purposely putting on ourselves when we talk about the pollutants and toxins that can lead to chronic inflammation. Okay, now for the part that most of us really truly care about, how we can fight the inflammation in our bodies. First of all, let's look at the causes. So looking at diet, what are some dietary changes that we can make to, reduce inflammation in the body? And some of it is inflammation, that we inflicted on ourselves with the way that we chose to eat. But, first of all, cutting out those saturated and trans fats and those refined sugars, and instead we're going to replace them with fruits and vegetables, both of which are very rich in antioxidants and fiber, and same thing with whole grains. They're going to get us a lot of nutrients and fiber. They're not antioxidant rich, but they get us that fiber, which, I love fiber. You listen to certain episodes, how much I love fiber. A fatty fish is going to be good for anti-inflammatory, which I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but the fat that we get out of things like fish, those are omega-3 fatty acids, and those are the ones that we want. Those don't lead to that chronic inflammation like the saturated or the trans fats do. Also, adding in or increasing our nuts and seeds. Again, they have more of those healthy fats, and some of them even have more antioxidants to them. So again, limiting those foods that are really high in trans fats, saturated fats, and those refined sugars. Also, keeping our intake of things like red and overly processed meats down can help with inflammation levels. And then, as always, we want to take in more of the good than the bad. So increasing the fruits and vegetables, whole grains, fatty fish, and our nuts and seeds as much as we can. Make those healthier swaps, the better it's going to be for the bodily chronic inflammation. Obviously, we cannot stop at just our diet. We're going to have to make some lifestyle changes as well. Let's start with physical activity. If we're living a pretty sedentary lifestyle and that is contributing to our inflammation, then obviously engaging in more regular exercise and being more physically active would make sense, that it's going to help reduce inflammation. Specifically, walking has been shown to really help with reducing inflammation. It kind of engages your whole body. It's great for your mental health. And it's very low impact, right? So it's a very healing type of exercise for us. If you ask anyone around me, I absolutely adore a walk. Specifically, I adore a walk and a good yap. So, if you need to increase your exercise and you want an entertaining way to do it, and you want something that's also been shown to really help reduce inflammation, then I highly suggest, grab your best gal pal or just whoever your yapping buddy is and take them on a walk. Start going on daily walks with them. Or if you've got a pet, like I've talked about before, having those four-legged friends that's a great way to, push us to want to go on more walks and get more of that regular low impact exercise that is so good for reducing inflammation. Okay, this one is really hard for me, and it probably will be for a lot of you, but reducing stress as much as possible. If we can manage our stress, we can greatly reduce the amount of chronic inflammation that our body has to take on. And I know that's saying something because, oh my gosh, stress management is the worst, right? Having to think about, okay, I can't let this bother me, but yet it's all around me all the time. So now it's always on my mind. It makes it hard to deal with that stress and to truly manage it in a way that's going to be beneficial for us. A lot of people like meditation for this and, those kind of deep breathing exercises. I'm not great at meditation. It's very hard for me to allow my mind to not then maybe, ruminate or sit too long on a negative thought, which will increase my stress. It's also hard for me to not just let my mind wander back to, whatever it is that I'm dealing with in my life. And sometimes those are the things that stress me out. And then I honestly end up more stressed out. But if you're someone who can meditate, great. Meditation is awesome for stress management. If you're not, that yap on that walk that I talked about is really great for stress management. But also, yoga, I know it's very closely related to meditation, but I find that going to a yoga class or even getting on YouTube and pulling up a yoga video and following along, when there's someone kind of leading me through something like that and my body is also engaging in that low level activity, that's when I do kind of have the ability to think a little more clearly, and I come up with game plans on how I want to handle things, or I realize, what, that thing that's been stressing me out, it's not as heavy, it's not as big as I think it is, and it gives me a chance to kind of, I shirk it off, right? Maybe it's during a little downward dog or cat cow, my personal favorite, child's pose or corpse pose. If you're at the end of your yoga session, that really helps me reduce stress. But whatever it is that helps you reduce stress in your life, and maybe take a close look at whatever it is that you are using to reduce stress. You might be surprised some of the things that actually could be increasing it for you. So whatever your method is for reducing stress, I highly suggest you use it, but make sure it's really helping you and it's not just making you feel better in the here and now and not helping you long term. Some of you, your stress management coping mechanism is already helping you with our next one. I know a lot of people who, when they're stressed out, they take a nap, right? I had a lot of friends growing up that this was the case, certainly a lot of friends in college, and maybe there were some other things going on there, but their stress response was certainly nap time, right? I'm not a great napper because if I lay down for a nap, I'm just going to sleep probably. And that's if I can fall asleep. But some people are really good at napping. I try to focus more on just getting good sleep at night when I am, sleeping and meant to be asleep, just because I can't get extra during the day, but trying to make sure that the sleep that I am getting is as high quality as it can be. And, I'm getting as much as I feel like I need each night. So before you let social media or, a TikTok influencer, which not saying that they're all wrong, I've seen many that are correct, but before you get influenced or scared even by talk about inflammation or get influenced to go on some fad diet because it promises to help with inflammation, just remember that no matter what, it's going to take both. It's going to take both a change in diet and also a change in lifestyle to really reduce inflammation. But that the power to reduce that chronic inflammation is in your hands. Reduce the unhealthy fats, increase the good ones, increase your fiber. Always increase your fiber, as I would like to remind everybody. But stay active. Manage your stress in whatever way you need to. Don't let it take over your life. And please, please, please get enough sleep, folks. Get those Z's, saw those logs, count those sheep, whatever it is, however you want to say it, get some good sleep. It'll help you not just with chronic inflammation, but in the rest of your life as well. Well, without anything else for me to yap on about, which is rare, I'll go ahead and tell everyone to have a happy and healthy day.